Okay, we're continuing with the quotes of Ayn Rand. This is part number 8. Okay, this is one of my favorite quotes of hers. In order to live, a man must act. In order to act, he must make choices. In order to make choices, he must define a code of values. In order to define a code of values, he must know what he is and where he is. He must know his nature and the nature of the universe. He needs philosophy. He cannot escape this need. The only alternative is whether the philosophy guiding him is chosen by his mind or by chance. So you have to make decisions, and you're either going to be a typical conformist, middle of the herd person, or you're going to develop the ability to think and choose and learn for yourself. Okay, Ayn Rand wrote an essay mocking Nietzsche, the Dionysians in Woodstock. She sort of compared them to the Apollonians. In her mind, she contrasted the Woodstock concert around 1969 with the Apollo landing. And she much admired the engineers compared to the people smoking drugs. Okay, her on Kant. I've talked about Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant is sort of a continuation of the ancient Greek school of the skeptics. You can't trust your senses, you can't trust your knowledge, that nothing's really learnable. And she called him the first hippie, the most evil philosopher who ever lived. And said that he's trying to teach young people a denial of their own senses, their own reason. He's anti-reason. And she said, Kant claimed in effect that the things we perceive are not real because we perceive them. This is a straw man. If you trace the roots of all our current neo-mystic philosophies, you will find they all grew out of Kant. Yeah, and like I said, and also Kant kind of grew out of Pyrrho and the skeptic school of the ancient Greeks, and he led to people like David Hume, people like Bertrand Russell, and all these other modern philosopher BS artists who pretend you can't know anything. And it sounds very similar to the Indian concept of Maya, the universe is unknowable. She says, today, while America's best minds go into the physical professions, where reality is harder but not impossible to fake, the realm of philosophy is abandoned like a vacant lot. It has become overgrown with Kantian weeds and overrun with Kantian squatters. Weeds, if unchecked, will grow faster than other plants and will consume the nourishment of flowers, of trees, of orchards, of farms, and then will sprout through the cracks of the cement at the foundation of impregnable skyscrapers, which is the spectacle we are seeing today. The haters are in control of our culture and in the open. Yeah, she's got a good point. I remember back when American institutions used to be good, back when, to say Harvard or Stanford meant something academically, I remember when Hollywood, there was a lot of good people in Hollywood. There was a lot of good, noble masculinity men. Now they're basically not allowed. Okay, she continues. She said, what Kant propounded was full, total, abject selflessness. This is the ultimate form of demanding that a man must turn himself into a shmoo, that mystic little animal of the Little Abner comic strip that went around seeking to be eaten by somebody. The ultimate monument to Kant and to the whole altruist morality is Soviet Russia, which is a disaster. Okay, she says, Aquinas brought an Aristotelian view of reason back to European culture, and this lighted the way towards the Renaissance. Yeah, before Thomas Aquinas came along, there was overemphasis on pie in the sky and the afterlife and all this mystic stuff, kind of like Platonic. And Aristotle is much more practical. Aristotle says, let us look down around us. Let us try to understand the world around us. He was a biologist. He had his own classification system, before Darwin. Okay. Ayn Rand continues, Aristotle is the cultural barometer of Western history. Wherever his influence dominated the scene, it paved the way for history's brilliant eras, and whenever it fell, so did mankind. If there is a philosophical atlas who carries the whole of Western civilization on his shoulders, it is Aristotle. Whatever intellectual progress men have achieved rests on his achievements. Aristotle leads to individual freedom. And so that's why she said, if you want to know the three best philosophers, they all start with the letter A, Aristotle, Aquinas, and Ayn Rand herself. Okay. And here's a quote by Leonard Peikoff. Ayn Rand is to Aristotle what Kant is to Plato. Ayn Rand's philosophy is Aristotelianism without paganism. Okay, that's a big statement. Ayn, the good can be achieved. It is real. It is possible. So long as there is no censorship, there is a chance for persuasion to succeed. Okay, Ayn Rand continues, Western civilization was the child and product of reason via ancient Greece. Yeah, by the way, I told you I just did that one book review, Dream of Reason by Anthony Gottlieb. And it was true. He went through every little idea of these pre-Socratics, the Socratics, and then the post-Socratics. And the Greeks were teaching themselves how to think. And arguing with each other was kind of beautiful in a way. And even though at first I was frustrated with the book, I liked it afterwards. Okay, in all other civilization, reason has always been the menial servant, the handmaiden of mysticism. You may observe the results. It is only Western culture that has ever been dominated, imperfectly, incompletely, precariously, but still dominated by reason. You may observe the results of that. When your impartial attitude declares, in effect, that neither the good nor the evil may expect anything from you, whom do you betray and whom do you encourage? But to pronounce moral judgment is an enormous responsibility. To be a judge, one must possess an unimpeachable character. Okay? And then she says, Christianity merely told man to love his neighbor as himself, and that's not exactly rational, but at least it does not forbid a man from loving himself. The greatest of the philosophers, Aristotle, did not regard ethics as an exact science. He based his ethical system on observations of what the noble and wise men of his time chose to do. Every major error, every major horror in history was committed in the name of an altruistic motive. To abstain from condemning a torturer is to become an accessory to the torture. The moral principle is this in this issue is judge and be prepared to be judged. Okay, so she would go head to head with all these people who were trying to pretend to be nice and trying to pretend to have the moral high ground, but they were really jerks. And that's what the left does. It tries to pretend it has a moral high ground. But when you look closely at it, it's evil. It goes around castrating children, bumping off babies, and doing all kinds of nasty things. Promoting feminism, which is Satanism. Okay. Anyways, we'll talk a little bit about Ayn Rand on writing and art. She says, as far as her writing, she says, my main goal is to present the ideal man to the world, of what man can and ought to be. The motive and purpose of my writing can be best summed up as saying that if a dedication page were to precede the total of my works, it would read to the glory of man. And again, that's the opposite of Johann Sebastian Bach, who said every composition was to the glory of God. She says, modern art is the emperor's new clothes. Okay. Writing is a serious business and not for any stray bastard who wants to try it. Yes, I thought that was kind of funny. She doesn't suffer fools gladly, okay? The only purpose of education is to teach a student how to live his life by developing his mind and equipping him to deal with reality. He has to be taught to think. He has to be taught the essentials of the knowledge discovered in the past, and he has to be equipped to acquire further knowledge by his own effort. When you write, you must trust your subconscious mind. The best day to edit an article is the next day after it's written. In art and literature, the subject and style must be worthy of each other. That which is not worth contemplating in life is not worth recreating in art. It was Aristotle who said that fiction is of greater philosophical importance than history because history represents things only as they are, while fiction represents them as they might be, as they ought to be. The primary value is that it gives the reader the experience of living in a world where things are as they ought to be. This experience is of crucial importance to him. It is a psychological lifeline, like a beacon raised over the dark crossroads of the world, saying, this is possible. Yeah, it's a role model, and we need role models. Okay, let's see here. She says, among the playwrights, the greatest are Friedrich Schiller and Edmund Rostand. Just a line from Edmund Rostand, he said, she is a trap set by nature. Yeah, men like women more than women like us, but women need men more than men need women. We enjoy women, they're fun, but we don't really need them. I mean, we can do whatever we need to do on our own, we just like them. whereas they don't really like us that much, but they need us. They're weak. And men are better at projecting things out into the distant future. Men are better at staying objective no matter how bad things get. I noticed too, it was kind of weird with all this high-fat phony stuff lately. All these women like believe the high-fat phonies, and I'm like, women are so good at detecting lying in personal relationships. It's like you don't even bother lying to your woman because anything you say, she'll get you, okay? But when it comes to listening to these high-fat phonies, all these women were defending the high-fat phonies. I couldn't believe it. I thought it was kind of funny. Okay, let us finish up with this last quote from Ayn Rand. She says, "When reason and philosophy are reborn, literature will be the first phoenix to rise out of today's ashes, and armed with a code of rational values, aware of its own nature, confident of the supreme importance of its mission, romanticism will have come of age. As far as literary schools are concerned, I would call myself a romantic realist." Okay, that's it for Ayn Rand today. I hope you found that helpful.